Hello and welcome to the sixth conversation on our interview series, the CBGA FTC Dialogues on Global Financial Transparency. Today we have with us Denise Velez and Klelia Guerrero Garcia, who will be speaking to us on gender-based post-pandemic recovery and interlinkages of gender with other global issues, especially in the context of Latin American countries. Denise Velez Martinez is a Mexican feminist economist specialist with experience related to gender-transformative public policies, including climate justice, women's rights, and feminist decolonial macroeconomics. She's the head of the research in policies and budget for gender equality and sustainable development in the feminist organization Gender Equity, Citizenship, Work and Family, also known as Equidad. Klelia Guerrero Garcia is a member of the tax justice team at the Latin American Network for Social and Economic Justice, LatinDad. She is Ecuadorian and has a master's in economics from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Her experience involves positions in the public service, the academy, and with NGOs, all of them focused on revising the paradigms that guide social and productive interactions and mobilizing to break them when necessary. Welcome, Klelia and Denise. So, my first question is to either of you who wants to jump in. My first question is there any difference between gender policy and gendered policy? Can you talk a bit about the meaning and the differences and how this difference impacts policy making?
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah, for the invitation and also for this question. First thing to say is that as a gender and feminist expert, I like to say that maybe it's a bit confused using these words, this difference between gender policies and gender policies. So it could be more useful to use a different terms that it's related to this. For example, in the first case, gender policies, it's related to gender sensitive policies. This kind of policies also is related to a model of thinking that it's called women in development. This model thinks as women as a minimum level and also thinking in women, just women, as part of the social policies, first of all, but also in education and health policies. So it's kind of a stereotype policies. And then in the gendered policies, we have these two proposals. First, the gender responsive policies that thinks in another step or in another level, not just in women, but also in gender relations. These unequal power relations that question why women it's in this situation, and also it's not thinking about the immediate needs of women, but also in their strategic interest, that is in the long term. And also that we want it's gender transformative policies that not only question these unequal gender power relations, but also the origins of this inequality, that it's in the economic system and with other inequality schemes as racism, colonialism, and thinking in a bigger picture of all these problems. So I think this is a better way to think in the different gender policies, and also thinking in what kind of policies we need to think, the implementation, that is the most difficult part of all these questions. First, you have to think in women, then you think in the power relations, and then thinking not just in gender relations, but in the bigger picture of inequalities.
Thanks. My second question is to Klelia. So the Financial Transparency Coalition recently launched a report which compares the country's policy responses to the pandemic. Can you highlight the findings of that report from your end, and especially on parameters related to gender?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah, for the question, and thank you both for the space and for making it possible to talk a bit more about this so important topic. About the report, I think what is there are parts of it that I would like to highlight. The first is that it was done in 21 countries, so it is about the global South in different regions. In Latin America, it included 6 countries, and what we kind of tried to do was to not go farther in terms of what the financing did in our countries, especially given that the propaganda was like, there was so much spending in the pandemic and post-pandemic crisis, and it is time for us to cut it. That was the propaganda. But when looking at what exactly the countries with these resources, then the truth is a bit far from this, because yes, there were resources invested in the response and the recovery given the pandemic, but at least 38% of this went to the big companies, to multinationals, which yes, they will probably give it in form of labor, in form of maintaining workers. But in a region as ours, where 7 out of every 10 workers is informal, there should have been more interest and intention in including the informal part of our population. And the according to the study, this sector just received 4% of the total resources, from what we know, right, from these countries. So that is just like a zoom in within the responses. And just talking about gender now, there was the UN tracker on gender policies given the pandemic, and there was the at least 60% of the policies had a gender component. But when you go and see what is the gender component, it is like super broad, not really thinking about the format, the needs, the target public. For instance, in Ecuador, which is the country I am from, and I have the context clear, there were some like food provisions and so on, but these involved conditions that were impossible for women to achieve, like some kind of registries that needed internet, also the pickup of the food needed for them to go to a specific place in a time where there was no public transportation, where kids were in the home and they needed to take care of them. So there were these, I will take Denise's words, we need to not only see these vulnerable groups, like not only women, but in general, in terms of policy making, but also like live like them, be them, so that have them within the design and within the implementation of the measures, so that the measures can actually respond to these needs.
Yeah, and even with these interventions and with these the policy responses that we have seen, I want to ask this specifically to Denise. What has been the gendered impact of the pandemic, and what are some of the long-term issues that we see that that will be faced by women and persons of marginalized gender and sexual identities, again in the Latin American context?
Yes, thanks for asking this, Sarah. As Klelia said, the first problem with the pandemic response is that the policies are thinking in women as beneficiaries and not as subjects of rights. So because of that, the main responses are no, the main responses was to the biggest corporations and in the economic sector, right? So one of the most representative negative impacts of the pandemic in Latin America and the Caribbean region, it's the decrease in the employment and labor conditions for women. According to Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, the setback is more than a decade in terms of the progress that we made before in labor market participation. And for example, in some countries like Mexico, less than the 50% of women are part of this labor force or labor market participation. This is different in other countries as Colombia or Argentina, but the mean is that we lost a decade. And also, and let me tell you that this is because of the overrepresentation of women in the most affected sectors in the first months of the pandemic, as tourism, as health, education, the first sectors that closed in the first months. And also because of the androcentric bias in these policies. From a feminist perspective, when we said androcentric, we are thinking about that the experience of a very small group of people, specifically of men, it's taken as the human experience. It's taken as the only one. And also that recognize just one kind of economic relations that are in the market and in the monetized part of the economy, and not more about the social reproduction activities and the social reproduction part of the economy that is related to the unpaid domestic and care work that is mostly assumed by women in all the world. We know that worldwide, women are doing 3 times more work, unpaid domestic and care work than men. Also, we know that in 15 years, men only increase in 15 minutes their participation in this kind of work. 15 minutes. So this it's the better example to talk about these inequalities in the labor participation, but also in the use of time, because this amount of work, of unpaid work, also is a great barrier to the labor force participation in the remunerated part of the economy, in the monetized part. So this is the worst, or the major negative impact in the region, but also it's related to the education participation, the political participation, and also in the access to programs of sexual and reproductive rights, and also of violence against women. As Klelia said, on women report the different policies that in the world was implemented to think about in the conditions of women, and most of these policies are related to women's violence against women. So I like to say that.
Thanks. And also, so there are issues such as unpaid domestic labor of women, unpaid care work, and these have specially been highlighted during the pandemic. Why are these significant topics at the moment, and what are some of the points that need to be addressed about these issues, especially when you're looking at the broader context of women's participation in the economy?
Yeah, being such an important part of like human relationships and human activities, care, I mean, domestic labor. We do not have much of a measure of how, like, it is not included in the traditional measures of how a country is doing, of how a country is performing. But there are some initiatives, for instance, in the region in Colombia, and there was the first country trying to measure the impact of care and domestic chores. And it was found that 20% of the GDP, the production in the country, could be the how much this sector not recognized as a sector contributes to the country. So 20% of the national production comes from the time that we as women and other specific groups devote to care and to chores and to domestic labor. So that is a huge part, because it is bigger than any other sector, even financial sectors, commercial sectors. It is the biggest. And it should not surprise us. And even we are not going to revise the methodology and how they measure it, and because it could be even more. But that is just a slide reference of how important and how significant this topic is. But then when we checked the measures, taking some kind of support for care and domestic labor during the pandemic, only 0.2% of this responded to unpaid care. And most of it, as Denise said, as a temporary aid, as a temporary assistance, as what we need was, assistance. We are the ones assisting the economy, and it is just some kind of recognition to that work, what we are looking for. And then what needs to be addressed to get to that point, where there are many ways or many proposals in which we could base this positioning. But I will just like to mention some initiatives already taken by some countries that could lead others to do something, because sometimes what is scary about the process, I think, is that it is like we see it as a too big to a step, as a super long road, super complex road. But if we do a step at a time, probably we are doing something. It's better than just being scared about how the road is. And then, for instance, I mentioned already this study in Colombia, and they also have this the national survey, that they are also having questions on how much time is it consuming, who is doing this, and that gives you a kind of a diagnostic, so that we could, as a country, or as a country, they could take actions on. So that is a first very good step. And then in Ecuador, there was the formalization of the activity. So people doing, just without any kind of formal relationship, doing normal unpaid care work or domestic labor, we are allowed to register us within the social service and to contribute to our retirement. But there is a huge problem with that, because although in theory that would be amazing, no one is doing it, because there are no resources within us for contributing. Even people like me or close to me are not contributing, because it is difficult to take this, the minimal money that you need to contribute to the social system, and then the actual impact is not really much. And then in Spain, for instance, there was another step done recently about the recognition of monoparental families, which is also it's another part, like within the all the components that gendered policy imply. And it is not about only recognition, but also about the possibility of accessing to benefits, social benefits, because some 7 out of every 10 families, they are not receiving any benefits now in Spain because of being monoparental and having only one child, as if that was some kind of a privilege that kind of frees them from any problem or any issue within critical times. So what I should, or what I see as a potential path on this is, first, recognition. So we need to know how much or how important is this for our countries. Then we need to recognize as well that this is necessary for us. If tomorrow no one wakes up, like the people doing care work or doing chores or doing domestic labor, just stop from doing this, we could imagine how that would go. Industries would be highly affected, families, and even like just thinking about raising children. It is not minor. We are taking care of not only the present, the future, and all what comes after that, in terms of integrity, in terms of responsibility with the social, environmental, civic parts of our existence. So I think this recognition would be the first part. The second, I can kind of divide the potential actions within 3. It would be kind of money to care, time to care, services and infrastructure to care, because those, like all of these, have some gaps that need to be addressed in different forms in different countries. And yeah, I would say even the recognition, the first part, is the base for this, because money to care will not be the social aid that is being seen now, but it would be more of, we need to invest in caring for our societies. The same with time. It is not a waste of our workers' time to give them parental leaves or time for them to care their family members. It is an investment for they to be well, for their family to be well, and for the whole industry as well to function. And then the same with services and infrastructure. So I think the recognition of the power that these activities have, of this sector of us as people doing that's, I think that is the most important one. And then go about the specific elements that are missing some potential, some space to take place.
And so both of you have very broadly touched upon this in your answers, but I want to dig a bit deeper. So what are some of the steps that are being taken for an equitable recovery, and what have been a few policy responses that stand out among the others? Can you just highlight a few?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And let me say another few words about the last question, because when we said that the work of women in the war are subsidizing the entire economy, we said that the lack of government responses, the lack of public policies are paying with unpaid work, doing mostly by women. And because of that, it's relevant to think about these kind of policies. And also that when we set care, we can understand uh, different activities of different sectors. That is nowadays it's a debate, thinking what is care and what is not, because we can think in care just as related to education, to health and social policies or social security policies, but also in a bigger picture, as I said in the first question, thinking in care as the care of environment, thinking in care as Clelia said, not just in one type of family of one type of beneficiary, as thinking about care as as a matter of justice, as a matter of redistributed justice, and not just in time, but also in an income and wealth redistribution. So what I want to highlight from Latin America, it's the first responses in the first months of the pandemic in Argentina to guarantee an income, and also this income for all the population, and not attached to this kind of as Clelia said, to have a bank account or to have an internet connection, and all of these issues in our context for all the people. But also, I think that nowadays what our countries are doing, that the biggest efforts to move towards a more justable or equitable society. First is the idea of a fiscal pact that allows to have more public resources to invest, as Clelia said, in different policies, but also to redistribute, as I said, time, income, and wealth. And part of this is the initial effort to think in national care systems that, in the case of Colombia, for example, are in the local context as local care systems are a better interesting measure to redistribute this work. For example, this initiative of thinking in how to say, it's like small parts of the city when you can find a health service, education services, recreated services, but also laundry, for example, a public laundry that reduce the time that you use in your daily life. And also in Mexico, we are well, the Mexican government are thinking in this kind of measures, the construction of national care system, and most of our countries. And I think it's a Latin American initiative that it would be a better way to think about the gender policies, as I said in the first question.
We also often tend to think of these kind of issues, or these specific policy issues in silos, and most of them are in fact interlinked. So I want you to kind of explain how, say, something like climate change can have a possible impact on equitable gender recovery, especially across the global south, and what are some of the other issues that directly affect the work that's happening on gender and gender related issues.
Sure, Sarah. As Denise said before, she already mentioned something about the care as being not only care for the family, but also for the nature and so many other things. But specifically about climate change and its impact on a equitable gender recovery, specifically within the global south. I can mention a few examples. Agriculture, for instance, many of our farmers, most of them are women, the ones that care, decide how our food is produced, far apart from the, big multinationals that also do that, but the small farming is mostly done by women. And this is important because if nature conservation, capacity building is not focused on them, women, there is no point, because in the end, they are the ones deciding this. But also to thinking further within this same line, even the lack of recognition of ownership of land from the side of women also could have some implications on how they care about the land. Because normally what happens is that they do all the work, but are they husbands or fathers or even no one in the family own the land. So that is also something some kind of conflict between, the short and long-term care of the land and the cultives. And then other example that comes to my mind is in the Amazon region, and especially within the Amazon region, there is the measure of how many women have been affected by cancer, given all the negative externalities of having industries, especially extractive mining industries, being operating in this territory. Being a small part of the population that takes care of the our air and our natural resources, they are also receiving the negative externalities of the extermination of our nature. So that is super important because there is nothing being said about this, or very little, and prices of these products, of the products being extracted and that are impacting not only the household support and the resources, but also the rest of the world. This should be taken into account when pricing these products and these results of this production. And it is not happening. On the opposite, what is happening is that they are receiving on top benefits that are reducing and making it like permanent, an operation that is not sustainable in the first place. And then the household management is also not minor. We decide mostly what the household consumes. So if we are the ones having the conscience of, this product is preferred to this one because of child labor or because of environmental impacts, then we could have a bit more of possibilities changing, from the consumption side, but also that needs for us to be able to decide, thinking about money. If this is the only product I can buy, then there is no choice, right? So those would be some examples I could bring in. And about some other issues that can be directly related to this is general social and economic inclusion, preservation of traditional medicine practices, of other ways of living that, at least on my side, for instance, is my grandmother who has given me some of this information, but I'm not sure for how long, within my other cousins or parts of the family, it has permeated as well, because I had the honor to live with her, and it is not, if we as policymakers, as researchers, as the ones making decisions about where to invest, did invest something on this transition, in this transmission of knowledge, things could also be different.
Just a quick a quick note on what is your advice to younger researchers or activists or individuals who are starting to work in the space of gender and interlinkages of other issues with gender? What is your quick advice to anybody in this space? So, very quickly, both of you.
My advice is that stop thinking in gender as a variable, as an isolated issue, and thinking in gender, as I said in the first question, as gender transformative, thinking in relations, power relations, not just gender, race, coloniality, caste, ethnicity, and also in this relation South-North. I think it's really relevant, and also said that care is not for the profitability of the private sector. And this is a message that we have to embrace in our days. And also that gender is not for the profitability of the private sector.
From my side, it is on us, to preserve or to change. It is not on our neighbors, it is not on our children, it is not on our parents, it is on us. I think that is the main message I would like to leave other people with. We all have something that could be impactful on the, on how this goes about care and how this goes about domestic course. If there is no government measure on recognizing domestic labor, the person making the money in the house could do it as well. So the form in which we talk about care and domestic work, the form in which we live domestic course and care, that is probably the best of messages we can transmit for people.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your time and for explaining the concepts, the interlinkages, the policy responses to us. And we look forward to having you again sometime. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.